Okay. All right. I'm going to start with our learning sponsors, and then people can get their nash, and from there we'll learn. Okay. A Year of Learning by Sue and Arnie Garelick in memory of Malcolm Proman and Philip Mann and Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, and Rivka Prolazna bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Siddell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov in her memory. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. Friends of Nina Moynester, Nechama Asna bat Yitzchak Aharon. Many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lazecha Nishmat Simcha Melech ben Meir Leib Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz, in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha. Have a month of learning by the friends of Lydia and Abe Krause in honor of their 50th anniversary. Also, a month of learning by Melon Haran Haller in memory of his mother, Fega Bas Yaakov. B. Pizer in memory of her stepfather, Avram Michal ben Shmuel Halevi. And Josh and Carol Sanborn in memory of his mother, Chiena Bar Aryeh Leib, and his father, Shmuel Aryeh ben Baruch. A week of learning by Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine in memory of Charlie's wife and Sam's sister, Menucha Sarah bat Yechiel Michal, Sam's mother and Charlie's mother-in-law, Zissel Bas Yehoshua. Evelyn and Isaac Blachor in memory of her mother, Pearl Rivka bat Harav Menachem Mendel. Have a day of learning today being the 2nd of March by Phyllis and Gedalia Reese in memory of her father, Harav Yosef ben Rav Shimon. Have also a day of learning today by Zahava Baum in memory of her mother-in-law, Etta Roiza bat Shimon. May Shemas have an aliyah, Krank Rafia, Velta Yeshira Shema Tzliya, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Keben Shtia. Okay. All right. Today's Gemara may look like it's short, but it's not. What?
Judging from the size of the toast.
Judging by the size of the toast post, exactly. Okay. So I want to share as we go into today's Gemara. We're on Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. We said we would go back just briefly and review this and then go on. The Gemara on the bottom of Kaf Amud Beis, okay, basically said there, right? What happened? It says, Shahayad mitamei et chaverta, okay, b'kodesh aval lo b'truma. After that, ochlin, okay, right? Ochlim genuvim biyadayim mesuavot, right? Our scroll translated it as we may eat dry foods with contaminated hands in the case of truma foods, okay? I would have translated it a little differently. Soiled foods, I don't know if it means contaminated. Contaminated comes awfully close to being matame. Okay, so it's language there is a little problematic.
Those which have not come into contact with moisture.
Okay, it's being very definite there. Okay. Right, so the point being there that foodstuffs, okay, may be eaten even with somebody whose hands are soiled, inappropriate, but it's not a question of the hands being wet, okay? Because once the hands are wet, remember it's going to be mechushar, that it will make that foodstuff considered to be then susceptible to tumah, okay? So what happens? Hainu tama de la kodesh lo. Why? This is, he says, okay, right? Because it's not the case of kodesh foods. Mishum de kitra, I'm sorry, no. All right, so he's saying in that case, lo betruma aval lo bekodesh. Why? De onain, and now we get to kaf aleph amud aleph, the top of our amud. De onain umechusar kippurim strichim tefillah. Okay, lekodesh aval lo letruma. Okay, so we can understand, okay, that the following again. Why? The question is why an onen, the mechusar kapara, one who's lacking, okay, in time to gain total atonement, is because that individual, perhaps it's a woman after childbirth, or it's a zav, okay, and they have to, as part of their purification, have to immerse in the mikvah. So in that situation, it could very well be that there's some residual wetness on their body, okay, even their hands, and therefore the point being that they touch foodstuffs, okay? There's a problem in terms of that situation for Kodesh, but not for Truma. So what about Onain? So Art Scroll here had a note: upon the death of any of one's 7 closest relatives, this was on 21A1, okay? All right, etc. A person enters a state of mourning, right? Biblically, the mourner is an onain and forbidden to partake of sacrificial food, okay? So according to, I didn't look up the pasuk, 2 psukim, until nightfall on the day that death occurred. So the Gemara here, Art Scroll is citing 2 specific, oh, they're not here anymore. It's going to grab the chumash. Okay. Oh, look at that. Zev to the rescue. Thank you, Zev. I've been using it. Okay. So the Art Scroll cites 2 places. Okay. One is 10:19 in Vayikra. Okay. Where the pasuk says as follows. Okay. I'm reading it in English. As for the fats from the bull and from the ram and the tail and the kidneys and the liver. Okay. All right. That's 19. Then says, and as for the fats from the bull, from the ram, the tail, right, etc., etc. Okay. So that doesn't really help me. So I look at the other source that the Art Scroll cited, 26:14 in Devarim. Right, but why does that tell me about an onain? That's my problem. You see?
Because that was talking about the death of Shnei B'nai Aaron.
Could be.
Aaron, that pasuk is talking about
that what he's forbidden to do those things.
Aaron was technically an onain on that day.
Right, but you got to connect from here. But you got to go from here over. I'm not disagreeing with you, Ruben. Okay, I'm looking to see why wasn't there a clearer. In other words, that's a savara. You're making a jump from here to a jump from there. But when we look at Devarim, okay, 26:14. Okay, that's right. 26:14, saying, etc. All right. So there in that pasuk 20, lo achalti ba'oni mimenu velo bi'arti mimenu b'tamei. So from the word ba'oni is where we get onain. That's why I wanted us to look at the psukim. Okay? All right, because as I said, in the other case, you're making a jump. You've got to say, oh, what's his okay. Here you've got at least a linguistic basis on the pasuk. Okay? That's my point. That's why I wanted us to jump to the psukim. Okay? Okay, thank you, Zach. All right, so that is the, okay, that is the point that we needed, because as I said, the Mechusa Kippurim, that was almost Muvan Me'elav. That was clearly because if they're not completely, if they needed to go into the mikveh to be totally, right?
The Mechusa Kapara has gone to the mikveh.
Okay, but they
needs to bring the korbanos the next
right,
day.
but they could still be wet. That still could be part of the issue.
No, even though they went to the mikveh, they're dry, but they still have to bring the korbanos the next day. The Isha has to bring korbanos.
Right, she has to bring also, right?
Yeah.
So
after
yeah,
she went to the mikveh at night, she's tahar, but she's mechusa kapara because she has not brought
the korban. True, but the point being, the Gemara is saying tzrichim tvila lekadesh, because they need that a preliminary step to bringing the korban is their tvila, and that's not the case in regards to truma. So that's the point that they're trying to draw, that parallel again between the difference between kodesh and the difference between truma.
Saying is I can eat truma at night.
Could you? I don't know.
I say you're telling me I lack. Quiet to that, I can eat truma, as if they say.
You're as a Kohen.
I can eat it, but prior to that I can't, even though I was in the middle. I gotta wait until the end. Tomorrow, do I bring a korban?
Yes.
You put it through one?
No.
You bring the korban, but
You bring the korban, you bring it, you bring the korban for Kodesh, but you could eat Truma. That's the difference. That's the difference. Okay? All right, let's go on now. Kaf Aleph, Amud Beis, Amud Aleph was second line. Gemara wants to question this. My Bakodesh, my Tamalo, asks the Gemara in regard to Kodesh. Why isn't that the case? Amar Rabbi Ela, this is Rabbi Ela, Mipnei she kvedo shel kli chotzeitz. What are they talking about? They come back to the discussion in the Gemara, where in our Mishnah, where it said for Kodesh, you cannot put one utensil inside of another, but for Truma we could, okay, if we needed to be tovel the Kelly, okay? So maybe we're talking about, and I almost thought I was going to actually bring stuff and dip it in the sink, right? Okay, okay. So there's a few things there that if you, in today's Gemara, if we had physical items, I'll give you another example afterwards. But think of what we call one cup nesting in another cup, okay? If you put those two cups into water, what's going to normally happen? The water should get in between the cups and it should raise up the inner cup from being totally nested in the lower cup. What? Okay, I'm not gonna, all right? But I'm saying, so as a result, the water will get and cover whatever is the inner item, even though it's inside something else, okay? So all right, well, here's two cups nesting, right? If you dip it in water, okay, the water is gonna cause the cups to separate, okay? You wanna try it? I'll let you do it afterwards.
They'll stick to one another.
Okay, and therefore, okay, but we're not talking about plastic, paper. Remember, most of their stuff was earthenware, pottery, handmade. Right. Right, they're not going to fit. Right. Okay, so in other words, the water is going to cause it to separate, and therefore the bottom, the sides. Okay, so if you put, let's say, a needle, let's use that as our example for the moment. If I put the needle inside here, what's going to happen when I dip this in the water? The water is going to make the needle rise, cover the needle, so that needle becomes tahor if it had been tameh initially. Okay, so the Gemara is going to come back to this. So it says mipnei shekvedo shel kli chotzetz, that the weight of the item, of the utensil, is going to make a separation. Okay.
It's gonna make it sit on the bottom.
Okay, it's going to here.
And
Okay.
it sits on the bottom, so it's not the water.
Well, we're going to see that in a second. We're going to see that in a second. Vaha, but the Gemara says Vaha mideseifa mishum chatzitza. But here earlier we said, okay, that there was an issue of chatzitza. When we immerse them, if one item, okay, inside the other. Okay, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to get to that. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Okay, but here, okay, we're talking about the question of separation. So where did we come to the issue of separation? We talked about, we used the example of a garment, okay, and the garment had a rope belt, okay, and we said the question there, did you need to untie the knot in the belt, okay, and immerse the belt separate from the garment, okay? For Kodesh, yes, we said, but for Truma, no. We said it didn't have to be, okay? So here, are we arguing that it's not the issue of the weight of the two items, but it's the question of separation? Is that our main concern? Okay. Reisha lav mishum chatzitza. The katani seifa. The reisha, the earlier statement from our Mishnah, the earlier example, okay, of, let's say, utensils, okay, there we said it was a question of separation. The katani seifa. Why? Because it says later, velo k'midat hakodesh midat hatruma, that the measure, the value for Kodesh was different than that of Truma. Shebe Kodesh matir umangiv umadbil v'achar kach kosher, right? That we said with regards to Kodesh, which we, again, coming back to our example, there we said you had to untie it, okay? And you had to dry it, and then you had to immerse it. And then afterwards you come back and tie it. Ubetruma kosher v'achar kach madbil. There you could simply tie it and immerse it. Okay, so that was our example in that case. Reisha v'seifa mishum chatzitza. Okay, maybe we need to say that in both cases, our earlier example of utensils and our example, later secondary example of the, let's call it again, the garment with the knots, okay? In that case, maybe the argument, maybe our problem is this issue of chatzitza, of separations.
And you don't, and the more question is,
okay, goodness, now, right, now we're going to get to the question. Why do I need both examples? Why do I need both examples here? Utsricha, says the Gemara. And yes, we need both examples, right? Both the examples of the utensils and the example of garments with knots. That's what we said. De'iyashme'in and reisha, because if I had only given the earlier example, which was the utensils, right? Hava Amina, I might have said, Hainu Tama de la Kadeshlo. Here, the reason that we say it's not appropriate regarding to something that's Kodesh, Mishum kvedo shel kli deika, because there's a weightiness, a heaviness to the objects. Okay, the two utensils, right? Aval seifa. But in regards to our second example of the garment, deleka kvedo shel kli, where here we don't have any weight or heaviness to the utensil or of the beged, ema lekadesh nami lo have chatzitza. I might say here, then there's no issue of separation. V'iyashmein and sefer. And had I only given the example of the second case, namely what I said was a garment with knots, okay? Hava amina, I might have said there. Hainu ta'ama delekadesh lo. The reason that we're saying here, again, for something of kodesh, it doesn't work. Mishum, why? He says, what happens? And here we get to a little physics, right? Here, mishum dekitra, because the knots, b'maya ahaduke mehadek. The knots, once it's dipped into the water, is going to tighten. Okay? So that's maybe aval reisha. But my example earlier of the utensils, of the pottery, of the cups, whatever, okay? What happens? Afkuye makfule lemana. It's going to lighten and make it flow apart when I dip it into the water. Okay? That's what's going to happen. Lo havye chatzitza. There would be no such thing as a chatzitza in that situation if the water is going to make the cups or the utensils, whatever, separate. Okay? So I can't argue chatzitza there. Okay? It's all right. So exactly what happens. Therefore, I do need both examples in of the Mishnah, both the example of utensils, okay, because there I'm going to say it could be an issue of their weight that keeps them together, and therefore the inner item might not become tahor, the water might not get all around it, etc. Okay, whereas the other, okay? So that's the point, okay, and therefore tzricha. All right. What? The water won't get inside here. Exactly, neither becomes. Right. Okay. Now, Rav Ila Latame. And Rav Ila, however, was consistent with his line of thinking. Excuse me. The Amar Rav Ila, Amar Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa. He said here, Eser Ma'alot Shanu Kan. Okay, and here, Art Scroll, I think, wanted to translate it stringencies. Okay? All right, okay. Heightened standards is what Art Scroll translated it. Koren translated it stringencies. In this case, I really preferred Art Scroll's translation.
This is stringencies also.
That's a stringencies also, I'm surprised. Okay, because we've seen the word ma'alot before used as standards or levels by both translations. Okay, so Rav Ila is saying that there were 10 heightened standards. I'm going to stick with Art Scroll here. Shanu, kan chamesh rishonot bein lekodesh bein lechulin. Okay, the first 5 distinctions between kodesh and chulin. Shene'asu al taharat hakodesh, regarding chulin that was prepared, etc., on a level of kodesh. Achronot, the later ones, okay, lekodesh aval lo lechulin shene'asu al taharat kodesh, between kodesh and chulin that was not prepared on a level of kodesh. Okay, my tama. What's the reason? Chamesh kamaita de'it laho derara detuma midoraita. It says the Gemara that the first 5 they have a connection, okay, with regards to Tuma Deoraita, Torah mandated. Gazru Baho Rabbanan, the rabbis therefore made a decree, Bein lekodesh, Bein lechulin shene'asu al taharat hakodesh. Okay, between actual kodesh and chulin that was prepared on a level of kodesh. Batraita, the later ones, right? Delete laho dirara detuma, where we say there is no connection of tuma midoraita. In other words, it's not a Torah mandated, let's say. Instead, what happened? Gazru baho rabbanan lakodesh. The rabbis made decree in regard to the kodesh. But, I'm going to put in here, l'chulin shene'asu al tarat hakodesh, but for any chulin, non-consecrated, that was prepared on a level of kodesh, lo gazru bahen rabbanan. The rabbis did not make a decree on that level. Okay? All right. Now, Rava Amar, says Rava, midaseifa have mishum chatzitza. Since we saw that in our two examples before from our Mishnah, one we said was utensils like cups, one we said could be clothing, okay, to try to give those. If we said there that our concern was a question of separation, Reisha, lav mishum chatzitza. Okay, our earlier example then, we determined, was not because of an issue of separation, chatzitza. That was that whole piece that said more was probably kaveda. Right, and this now says it's a challenge. Why? Because Rav Ela was saying, all right, something else. Varesha haini tama, all right? And the reason the Resha is why? Gezerah shelo yadbil mechatin v'tzino wrote b'kli. Okay, what was the Gezerah? Perhaps that in that case, if you took the cup, all right, and you put into it what's called, let's say, the needles and hooks, okay, right, in there. So, right, and you dip them inside, what's going to happen? Are they going to be completely immersed in water? No. Okay, the water is not perhaps going to separate those needles and hooks, right? They may just sit on the bottom of the cup, okay, or the utensil, whatever it is. And so neither the needles and hooks will become tahor, nor the utensil, because there'll be something covering it inside. Okay? Maybe that's it, right? Bikli she'ein befiv k'shefoferet hanud. Okay, because here too we have a certain measure. What's that measure? It's the mouthpiece whose width is that of a tube for a wine skin. In other words, we have a skin bottle tube. What happened? They would skin the animal, and if they're using that to hold liquid, okay, they would stick a tube like a reed inside perhaps the leg or whatever, and use that to be able to access, okay, the liquid. So that measure of that tube, okay, right, that was the measure that they were using, okay?
In other words, the measure of that tube is wide enough.
Right.
It joins the water.
In other words, the water
to the outside.
Okay. In other words, we're going to give another example in just a second.
That's the
clarify. Just to clarify. Okay. So in other words, what is that width? Okay, of that tube. Think of a straw. Okay, for a moment. If I have a balloon, okay, a balloon All right, we've all, I assume at some point in our lives, blew up balloons for kids, grandkids, whatever. Okay, the shape of a balloon, it has a neck, and it has, when you blow into it, right, you go through the neck, and it has the part that expands. Okay, so an ordinary straw would normally fit inside the neck of the balloon. Right, everybody with me? Okay, so what happens if we think of the balloon that's the skin bottle? All right, so you could have liquid inside the balloon. Okay, all right, and then the question is, if how wide, okay, what's the width of that straw, okay, that's inside the neck of the balloon? It's very narrow, okay? Now, if you were dipping that, okay, whole item into a large pail or bucket of water, how much of that water from the bucket is going to actually be able to get through that straw and in and mix with the water that's inside the balloon? Minimal, right? Okay, we need to have a certain width, at least the width of that straw, to connect one source of water, one place of the water, with another place of water. Otherwise, it don't work. Okay? Now, I'm going to use a parallel example in a second. I have a puddle, and I have another puddle. Okay? This puddle is fairly deep, and it contains 40 seah of water, enough for a mikveh. This puddle only contains 20 seah of water. Okay? But if I were to dig a narrow channel from the 40 seah puddle to the 20 seah puddle, and the width of that channel was how much? Right? Kishoferet hanud, all right? As wide as a, let's say, straw. Does this? Okay, and now we're going to get to that in just a second, right? How much is that width? What is that width going to be? But if I have that channel, right, then then it's like I've created a flow from here to here, and that 20 seah now becomes viable for immersion. Okay? What? Unless it's upstream, like we saw before. Right. Okay? All right. So what happens? But now my question is, how wide does that channel or that straw have to be? It has to be enough that I have 2 fingers and I can turn them totally around. Okay? That's what it's telling me. And that's what the Gemara is going to continue in just a moment. So coming back then, V'reisha hainu tama, gzeira shelo yadbil machatin v'tzinorot bekli. Why is a gzeira that they said you do not immerse, okay, needles and hooks. Right? These were hooks like for spindles and stuff like that. She'ein befiv, because the mouthpiece of the utensil may not be wide enough to satisfy our required measurement of a shvoferet nud. Okay? Think of a basket for a moment. Okay? All right? We have baskets were woven and they could have various size openings. Right? Okay, that would be an example too, right? Okay, Kiditnan, as was taught. And here's the example I tried to bring to clarify. Eruv mikvaot, a mixing, a combination, okay, a joining, okay, of mikvaot, right? Mikvah here being gatherings of water, right? What does it must be? What must be that channel? Kishfoferet hanud. It must be the thickness of that shfoferet, okay? Right? That's what we're saying, right? Ke'oveha, and what is its thickness, right? Right? Ukechalala, and its hole or its space, b'shtei etzba'ot chazrot l'mekomam. Okay, for two fingers that must be able to twist and go all the way around. Okay, it's almost like, almost like the size of when you make like what used to be considered an OK symbol. Okay, that kind of thing. I'm going to go on a little bit further so we're not, don't have a big problem tomorrow since it's Rosh Chodesh timing, okay? So what does the Gemara then tell us on Kaf Bet Amud top, right? What happens? Savar Rava. This must mean that Rava is of the opinion, right? Savar La Kahad Amar Rav Nachman. That Rava must be the same opinion as to Rav Nachman. Amar Rava Bar Abuha, in the name of Rava Bar Abuha. Yud Aleph, there are 11 ma'alot shanu kan, 11 standards, right? Sheyesh sheish rishonot, 6 earlier ones, bein lekodesh, bein lechulin, between kodesh and chulin, shnei asu al tarat hakodesh, and chulin that was made on a level of kodesh. Achronot, the others, okay, lekodesh, right? Aval lo lechulin shnei asu al tarat hakodesh. But the others are not regarding Gzera, regarding, right, between Kodesh and Chulin, that was not made on a level of Chulin, not made on the level of Kodesh. If, by the way, if you're using Art Scroll, okay, make a note for yourself to look at 22A1, number 6. Okay, where it explains the following term. Okay, in just a moment. My ika bein de Rava le Rabbi Ila. What's the difference then in the view between Rava and Rabbi Ila? Ika beinayu sal vegargutni. Okay, we have the difference between them between a basket and a gargutni. A gargutni is a wicker bin that was used as a strainer. Okay, that's the point, and that's where Art Scroll's note is. Okay, on 22A1, number 6. All right, shemil'an kelim v'hit bilan. Okay, how did you put stuff into the mikvah? Right, even today you have to usually you put it inside something. All right, a basket, or in Israel they use plastic shopping baskets, okay, or other things, and you lower that into the mikvah. All right, so the question is the width of the mouthpiece there. All right, shemil'an kelim v'bilan laman da'amar mishum chatzitza. Okay, to the one who's concerned about separation, ika. Laman da'amar mishum gzeira shema yatbil machatin v'tzinorot. But according to the one who says the gezerah comes lest one immerse the needles and the hooks, b'kli she'ein befiv k'shefoferet hanud, in a utensil whose opening is not the size of that shoferet, that mouthpiece is not what we said, like wide enough of 2 by 2 fingers. Sal v'gargotni she'ein befihen k'shefoferet hanud leka. That kind of utensil is not acceptable to be used.
Is acceptable. It's not something to the Gezerah because it's so, the mouthpiece is wide.
I got the impression it was just the opposite.
It says because there is no basket or large strainer whose opening is not the size. It's a double
Not
negative.
it's a double
There
negative.
is a hamshaka. The
Okay.
Gezerah was maybe you're going to use a keli that's so small.
So
there's
too
no
narrow.
hamshaka,
But this is theirs is wider. Okay. All right. Salva gargatni she'ein befian k'shoferet hanud leka. That theirs is not wide enough, and that's not the case.
It is wide enough.
Right.
There's no baskets that would
Right.
have an opening so small that it wouldn't satisfy the requirements that you'd be able to put your 2 fingers.
Of those, I'm going to go back and look at it. Okay, I'm still not convinced. Right? Da'amar Rava salva gargutni shemil an kelim v'hit pilan tohorin. Okay, that a basket and the gargutni that one has put in utensils and immerses are tohorin. Umikva shechelko basal the gargutni. Okay, and a connection of water, an association, a gathering of water, where one has been divided using a basket or a gargutni. Hatovel sham lo altalo tefila. Okay, that tefila immersion is not acceptable. Why? Daha ara kula chalchule mechal chala ubainen deika meiseya b'makom achad. Okay, and he's saying here, in that case, what happens there, if you have this basket right there that separates between 2 associations, 2 gatherings of water, immersion there is not successful because the ground is going to absorb, okay, what's happening, and we need 40 seah all gathered in one place. And we'll stop right there, okay? And I'll go back and look over that, okay, today. All right? Yes, sir.
It said before, a couple of lines before, because there is no basket or large strainer whose opening is not the size of a skin bottle. That means every basket is the size.
Okay, where do you have that? Let me see. Just tell me, I've got.
Lines before.
Yeah.
Well, the Salagagutni Chain Fihen.
Right, at the,
Right. So, right.
That means every basket it's as large at least.
A sow is a big basket.
Salvagagoni
Like
Shamilan Kelim Bilan.
the basket in the mikveh is a big shocking basket.
Salvagagoni She'ain Befian Kishfoferet Hanud Lek. Because there is no basket or large strainer whose opening is not the size of a skin bottle's tube.
Right.
Okay. So in other words, they're arguing, okay, here's the note. These vessels are always made with wide mouths.
Right. So
and their openings will thus never be smaller than a skin bottle's tube. Okay. All right. That's what I must have missed then. Okay.
But what the Gemara is talking about now is your table in this basket, this big basket, all right? And the bottom of the basket, the holes in the bottom of the basket,
yeah,